Thanks for watching. Now, we have become so consumed by life and reality. A lot of us have forgotten, real history. And we know how important history is because those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Now, when you go back and look at history, history tells us exactly who the real enemy of freedom, peace, and humanity really is. When you go back and look at all the civilizations that have been conquered and taken over, and look at the people who are now in control of these countries, we can see what the agenda really is. Now, we today, African Americans, we are the descendants of these civilizations that have been taken over, conquered. We are the descendants of slaves, and we have forgotten history. We have forgotten, what our ancestors went through. And I say that because when you go back and look at what happened to African Americans or black people after slavery, they understood that there would be a such thing as white privilege. They understood that there would be, white supremacy. To them, it was just a given. It was a no-brainer. Of course, it's going to be white supremacy. Of course, it's going to be, white privilege because they understood who their captors were. They understood who they were and that, for hundreds of years, these people have ruled this land and have enslaved African people. And there's no way, they were just going to give us, the same level of respect that they had for each other. They wasn't going to give us the same access to resources that they had. So the former slaves understood this and they acted accordingly. They went out and did what they had to do. They understood that it was going to be that much harder for them to succeed, which is why, they worked so hard. And you would have to work really hard to obtain success like, Black Wall Street, which is why we always talk about them, because it's amazing that, in the 1920s or before that, they amassed so much wealth and success. It's because they knew they wasn't going to get no handouts. They understood the magnitude of the situation. They understood that, white privilege exists. They understood that white oppression existed and that they had it to be that much more successful and work that much more hard to obtain, their goals. So it's almost as if we are suffering from Stockholm syndrome. A lot of us just have identified so much with this American system. And again, as I talked about before, we don't realize that this is not our culture, that we was brought up in a culture that is from, a foreign people, from Europeans. This is a European culture that we have been brought up in. And we believe that, the way we are and the way we act in the African American community, is us, that we have created our own culture. And this is something that belongs exclusively to African Americans. But again, as I always talk about, when you examine the culture in the African American community, it is, it's hurtful, it's harmful to our progress, and that's by design. And you got to understand that the reason why, separation was good is because we controlled our culture. We controlled what came into the black community and what the black community was feeding off, or what was fueling the black community. And that was a sense of unity, in the sense of wanting to be successful and have real progress. And now, we have been given benefits and privileges and the illusion of freedom. And we believe that now we are supposed to be on equal par as the descendants of our captors. So we got to understand the situation, because we have seriously forgotten. And, we scream for, equality and everything like that. And we feel like, things are supposed to be equal and everybody's demanding justice and this and that. We forget the past. And we got to understand that history has shown us that they will never give us the same equal treatment as, white people in this country. And everything that we have seen in history is proven that. We are, almost delusional for expecting that to happen. And I understand, what the Constitution talks about. And, we got to remember that it was put together while we were still slaves. And I understand what everybody believes we are entitled to. But we got to look at the fact that now, 2017, this day and age, all this time has passed. We have had a black president. And you would think things would be different. You would think the racial tension that we see today, would not exist. And we got to understand what's fueling that and what's keeping that tension going. And that's for a reason. So it's almost as if they are trying to tell us that, we're not going to give you, just a free pass or an easy pass to success. You're either going to be a jigaboo, or you're going to dance, or, be a part of their sports system or their acting system or some kind of system that they control if you want to, get rich. And this is what we're seeing. Everybody who is a professional athlete and, in the music and movie industry is basically doing the bidding of the ruling elite. We got to go back and look at what we was doing before integration and understand how economically, they was able to build success, with so much, stacked against them. There's almost no excuse today for us to be where we are at when, things are a lot easier. And you have back in the 20s with Black Wall Street, and then in the 30s, 40s, 50s, which I talked about before, that nobody's talking about how we were still successful. They want you to believe that we wasn't. We was, and I've proven that. But we got to get back to that, and we got to understand what we were able to do back then before, integration. And it's because we had a sense of understanding that white privilege exists, white supremacy exists, and we got to work our way around it instead of trying to, get the system to accept us and to get the system to let us be a part of it. We got to get together and do our own things like, our ancestors did, like, the people did back in the 20s and, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s and everything like that. And understand what's really important in the Black community and get away from these trends that have been given to us. As I said, they take everything good from us. All of our leaders, all of our real leaders have been killed, assassinated. So we got to pay attention to what they give us. They give us this culture. We have the hip hop culture because it's destroying us, and they understand that. So we got to pay attention. Now, what I'm really going to be getting into in this video is for people to understand the situation that I just described that has happened in this country. As I talked about before, we understand we were already here in America before slavery. Africans was already here. Now, the situation that occurred here with the massacre, the genocide of so many, the real Native Americans, Black people, and the so-called Native Americans that was here, we have to look around the world and see that this has been taking place. We are so consumed with slavery and Jim Crow and civil rights movement and everything like that. We are not looking around the world for the same exact things. We know about apartheid in South Africa. But when you go and you start looking at other countries with people of color, we see the same thing that happened in America happen in Africa. We see colonization. We see imperialization. We see the fact that, you have most of Africa has a constitution. You see African countries with presidents. What's going on? So we get this whole backlash when we start speaking about, white supremacy, and we start speaking about, slavery and everything that happened. And people look at us as if we are crazy for speaking about these things. It was the past. Let it go. Leave it alone. When we can look at Africa and see the same situation going on. What is Sudan doing with a constitution? What is Sudan doing with a president? And a lot of you get confused because they have these Black presidents and you think, well, he's Black, then everything's going to be fine. It's Africa. And you don't realize the same type of system we have here in America is over there. They put a puppet in place, or they bribe a president, or they bribe a leader, or threaten a leader and get him to, run the country and do their bidding. Why would African countries have a constitution and a president? And a lot of these countries over there, same as we do in America. That's something you need to really think about and look into. Now, there's an illusion that a lot of people believe that America is just this great country that is basically doing what's best for its people, when we can clearly look at the conquest of America. And not just that, we got to look at America's allies who was helping them with this conquest. We got to look at England and understand that the two go hand in hand and what's really going on here. So again, everybody's so consumed with life and reality and, television and entertainment, we're not paying attention to history. We're not paying attention to what's going on around the world and not understanding the colonization that has taken place. Not just in the past, but it's still been taking place, especially in Africa. And we got to understand what's being put in place and what's being set up and how all these African countries, has been taken over. When you pay attention and look at the countries that has been colonized, look at the map. This is most of the world that has been colonized. So when we talk about white supremacy, this is what we're talking about. And a lot of people don't understand that you have Europeans going into these countries trying to bring in religion. It's the same story. They bring in, the missionaries with religion. And once they understand the layout and what's going on, if there's resources, if there's gold or what have you there, then they send in the military, or they try to turn the leader, the ruler, to allow them to come in and, set up shop, basically, and to advance their civilization and put their civilization on the same par with their enemies or what have you. It's the same type of story. But eventually, the ruler ends up being overthrown, and the Europeans end up taking over. It's the same thing. They'll either, start a coup, a military coup where a military leader takes over and they run it through him, or something to that effect. It's the same situation. So why has it still been going on? Slavery ended a long time ago. Why has this consistent colonization of African countries continued to take place? Why are they installing constitutions, which we know was a setup, as a trap to trick the people? They're installing presidents and systems. These people in Africa were doing fine. The civilizations was doing okay. They were cool. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of things could have been taught to African people to make their way of life better. But you got to understand that these people have survived for thousands of years without no new innovations, without technology, in a spiritual system. And they have done well. And, there was no diseases. And when you have access to the natural resources and you understand about farming, there's no famine. There is none of the problems that they have shown us on TV. The reason why they show us this stuff on TV, because when you have a village that is not, doing what you want it to do, they can block out the resources. They can starve the people. This is done on purpose. And this is what people wasn't understanding about feed the children and everything like that. You had the military basically arm the enemies of a lot of these villages, a lot of these groups. And they would basically go in and destroy the food, destroy the crops, destroy the economic structure that existed where, the people was able to feed themselves. And then as the children starve, they send the cameras in there and say, we got to go in and help these people. We got to feed the children. And this is done on purpose. And then now you got African Americans embarrassed to be called African because they associated with these starving children in Africa. Now understand that this is Europeans that have come in there and destroyed, the economic structure and, force these people to flee and to starve to death and to, to live in subpar conditions. And, they arm their enemies with AK-47s and guns. And we see, all the stuff that has happened since then. We see the groups that have risen up and have basically, torn through Africa, because of, these weapons, and because of the lies that has been told. And Africa is basically still, not united, it's still separated, because of things like this. And you would think with everything that's going on in the world that Africa would have united a long time ago. But we got to understand that colonization, imperialization has been going on in Africa for decades. Because you have to understand, you have to look at history. As I said, these people have existed for thousands of years. All of a sudden, they don't know how to farm. All of a sudden, they don't know how to feed themselves. How have these people existed for thousands of years if we go look in Africa and people are starving to death? We can see their ribs. You see kids, bony, ribs touching. How has this happened? And these people were able to feed themselves for thousands of years and able to survive as civilizations in Africa. And a lot of them did really, really well. Now, all of a sudden, we start seeing in the 90s and everything, all these feed the children commercials and everything like that. What happened? So you got to understand what has been taking place. Everything is an excuse to go into Africa, an excuse to bring in aid, an excuse to examine the land for resources and then extract it, which they have been doing, we've done for decades now. This is what has taken place. So you got to understand this colonization. While we sitting up here arguing about America and America's past and saying that this stuff is over and it's done, this stuff has continued. Now, I put out videos for a reason. When I talked about in my previous videos about manifest destiny, when we understand that this is what they put in Manifest Destiny, that they was going to expand their territories, basically overseas. And this is what they have done. So they're telling you in things like Manifest Destiny, and when you look at the divine right theology or divine right theory, this is what has taken place. These people believe that they are supposed to rule. They told you in Manifest Destiny that they was going to expand their territories. They have done that. And we can look around the world and see the military bases everywhere. What's going on? It's not just America, as I talked about before. When America was taken over, they are basically using America to go and, complete their agenda. And we think we're being patriotic and we're being American to go out there and kill these people and take their land, when we are fulfilling the agenda of the people who have taken over our country. And it's tough for people to see that because, one, these people look white. And we don't understand that, yeah, they are white, they are Europeans, but from different countries. They have no loyalty to America. America, it's been gone. It's gone. And what's happening is you have these white Americans being patriotic and thinking that they're fighting for America, not realizing they're fighting for these Europeans. And these Europeans' desire is to destroy America and use America first to conquer the rest of the world. And this is what has taken place. This is what is still taking place. So we got to understand that Latin America, South America, same situation, colonized. Same situation. You have presidents installed. You have constitutions installed in Latin America. What's going on? Why in all these countries with people of color, we see colonization, imperialization? You go to Jamaica, you see all these white Jamaicans with the Jamaican accent. That's colonization. And we got to understand what has taken place. Now, it's fine. You got white people in Jamaica, white people in Africa, what have you. That's all well and good. But when you see that, and you also see the establishment of a constitution and a president installed and a whole economic situation and a whole governmental structure that resembles America. And we know what happened in America. We got to wake up. You got to open your eyes and look at history and see what's still taking place. And we are so traumatized by slavery and everything that happened with Jim Crow and everything like that. We're not realizing that it's still happening, it's still going on. So when we talk about colonization, when we talk about, white supremacy and everything, this is what we mean. And a lot of people always keep it straight here in America, not thinking about the rest of the world that is being colonized, that is suffering from, white supremacy. You have now places in Africa where Africans can't go. They won't allow black people into certain places in Africa. And that's ridiculous. So we got to understand who is really in charge and what's going on and who these sellout African presidents are, because there's a lot of them. And we're going to look at this stuff, and you got to see what the agenda really is, and that, they're keeping us focused on America and American issues and our own issues and everything like that. Meanwhile, they have colonized most of the planet, and they have most of the planet under their control, under their systems. One of the things you'll find when you travel a lot and when you be in countries for a while, you'll see the system's the same. You'll see they have a healthcare system, and, they got social security numbers and birth certificates and what have you. And it's like, damn, I thought that was kind of unique to, America and England. When you get the same thing in Sweden. And, sometimes when you have a small country like Sweden and other countries, they'll do that. But really, we understand it's a monarchy that's behind the scenes. And because the country is predominantly white, they let it be. Now, when we go and look at these countries that have been basically taken over, it's easy to see, what's going on. When you take a look, we know that the banking system has been taken over. That's the first thing they do is instill this central bank, just like they did 1913 with the Federal Reserve. We see this Rothschild-owned bank installed in these countries. And when you pay attention to all the countries that has a constitution and a president, you have a private central bank being set up. So right now, there's only 3 countries that don't have, the so-called Rothschild private central bank. That's Cuba. We know North Korea. And the third country would be, Syria used to be one. We know that Libya, Afghanistan, Iran, Iran would be the third one that doesn't have the Rothschild Bank. But just pay attention. This is why I say history. So we got Iran, we got Cuba, we got North Korea. Only 3 countries right now that don't have the so-called Rothschild private central bank. Right before that, who also joined this party was Sudan. We had Syria. You had Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. So we see what just happened with history. We see that, 9/11 happened. We had invasion into Iraq. We had invasion into Afghanistan. Then we had Libya taken down, Syria taken down. So all these countries that was once not with a Rothschild central bank has been taken down. We have went to war with, taken over, and now installed this bank. And then it's like people can't put it together. It's like, okay, so what? This is for America, what have you. This is colonization. This is imperialization. This is genocide. These people are being wiped out. We have all these Syrians and people from a lot of these different countries fleeing their home, because of war, because of what America has done and what their allies have done in these countries. And it's already been proven when you go back and look, even under Saddam, under Muammar Gaddafi, these countries was doing really well. Saddam was supposed to be this tyrant, murderer, killer, what have you. He actually ran the country really well and people was happy. I know Iraqis, I'm cool with a few Iraqis who talk about this, that Saddam was fine and everything that was going on. They understood Saddam was put in place and what happened, but a lot of people will tell you Saddam did well. A lot of stories that we read about the bad things about Saddam was, put there for us to feel the way we felt about Saddam's regime. But you actually talk to Iraqis, they'll say no. It wasn't that bad. Some things was bad because of the laws he had in place. But if you had the unique opportunity to be in Iraq before, during, and after its destruction, you can see the change. And we see that Libya was doing well and these countries was doing well before the so-called, American intervention, before we came in here and fucking didn't mind our own business and, made their business ours. But when you look at what's taking place, it's clear. It's the systematic takeover of countries around the world. The implementation of this central bank, constitution, and the control over the country. So now you have only these 3 countries with no private central bank. Again, Iran, Cuba, North Korea. You have Russia fighting to kick out the Rothschild Bank, which he basically don't want a Rothschild stepping foot into the country. You have China as well fighting to get rid of the Rothschild Bank, and you have Iceland fighting to get rid of the Rothschild Bank. We remember the whole rebellion that happened there, which should happen everywhere. People in Iceland overthrew the government. They seen it was crooked and what was going on, that they was plunging them into debt more and more and more, just like what's happening here in America. They didn't sit around and watch, TV while it happened. They went there and overthrew them, took them out. And they're trying to get rid of the bank as well. So we can see clearly, when you look at history and pay attention to what's going on, it is the systematic takeover of countries around the world to get it under this umbrella of this whole, New World Order. Now, I always talk about the Bible and being brainwashed and how, the Bible and God and our government system kind of goes hand in hand. And we got to understand how the Bible has groomed us to accept what our government is doing, because, we accept the flaws in the Bible, religious people. So again, when you go back, I always compare this thing with the Bible. We was given the Bible in slavery. And I mean that figuratively, not literally, for anybody who want to act stupid. We was given the Bible during slavery, figuratively. They taught us about this white Jesus or what have you, and how to pray and sing to him. And, we didn't really pay attention or really, throw up a fit when, somebody was killed or hanged or raped. When, our prayers went unanswered, people still just praised the Bible and believed in the Bible. There was no real backlash against God, because, once you start talking about God and talking against the Bible, people call you, Antichrist or Satan or devil worship or, crazy or stupid or what have you. And when you pay attention to the government system, it's basically the same way. You start talking against the government, people call you crazy, conspiracy theorist, un-American, unpatriotic, stupid, crazy. It's the same kind of comparison. Now, the whole thing is, when you look at the Bible situation, it's like, come on. God doesn't talk to us. So we can't basically curse God out and go to God to tell him that we're not going to follow him no more. We can't get to the top. Can't get there. It's the same situation with a president. You can't really curse out a president and get to the president to voice your opinion or what have you. We can protest and do the things that we do, but we know it's futile. Nothing is going to happen. They're not just going to change policy because we out there with a bunch of signs. So to some people, it's almost like, why try?